another actionable tip for job seekers who are looking about the company is to look on social media to see what other people are posting about the companies that you're going in to interview. That's the first step that I would do.
Yeah. We also need to set aside time to be able to have conversations with people within the department, not just those outreach individuals that are in the job search, such as recruiters, HR, and hiring managers. We need to get the skinny on actually what's happening inside those organizations.
Welcome back to the Career Advancement Academy. We are so excited to be here. I'm Kara Dennison, and this is Jack Dennison. Last week's episode, we talked about, is there a hidden enemy holding you back in your career? And most likely, if you are 70% of the people who suffer from imposter syndrome, that might be you. So highly recommend that you check it out. This week, we are going to talk about the one mistake in a job search that can actually derail your career.
Kara, what is that one mistake?
I will tell you, it is not aligning your personal values with your future potential company's culture.
Today, we're going to show you how to avoid that number one mistake by discovering and aligning ourselves with the company culture prior to signing on. Because if we aren't careful and we end up somewhere that it's impossible to work, now we got a bigger problem on our hands because now we need to go back into the job search and explain a very complicated situation in a rough job market.
Yeah, and this could set your career back for years. And it's something that not a lot of people actually pay attention to in their job search. And I want to ask you, when was the last time you did an evaluation of your personal values? And tomorrow on our YouTube channel, Optimized Career Solutions, I'm going to be going over in a video how to determine what your top 5 personal values are. So definitely make sure to stay tuned and check that out on our YouTube. But before we get to that, today in this podcast episode, we are going to be talking about company cultures, how to understand them, what's the difference between a company culture and a department company's culture, and how can we align your personal values to your company's culture and how you can find those things out so that you're better informed within your job search and you're making the right decision for you.
I guess a great place to start is this something that's important to most job seekers? Is alignment something that most job seekers seek in today's job search?
Yeah, in fact, according to a study from the Harvard Business Review in 2015, I know it's a little outdated, but 80% of professionals consider cultural fit an essential to their job satisfaction. So this is a pretty big thing.
I would imagine that if that was done in 2015, that number's only gone up.
Yeah, especially after the pandemic, right? After the pandemic, a lot of employees, a lot of professionals, a lot of you probably took a big look at their lives, right? A lot of companies really showed who they truly are during the pandemic, right? And how they really value their employees and how they treated their employees when that happened. So if you're starting to think about, okay, it's been a while. I've watched my friends and my families go through a whole bunch of layoffs, being mistreated by their companies, and maybe you're being mistreated by your company, and you're thinking, I'm done with this. My company's toxic, or rather, I'm just not aligned any further at the company I'm at. Maybe it's time for a change. One of the things that you might be wanting to really think about is, what types of companies would I thrive in? And not just the type of industry, but what type of company and what types of things do they value would I thrive in?
How do we even kind of start to understand what companies I would thrive in?
So the first thing that you would want to do is really start to evaluate what your personal values are.
Okay, so we start with the self. Okay.
Yeah, start with the self. So how can you start figuring out where you fit in if you don't know yourself, right? And so I highly recommend checking out tomorrow's YouTube video to figure out what your personal values are. But you're going to want, the quick overview is to really start figuring out, what are your personal values? What do you hold very close and dear? What are your non-negotiables? And what are some of the things that you can compromise on?
I guess for some of the listeners out there that might not be thinking about, we probably should talk about some of the ways that if we're not aligned, how that can affect us, right?
Yeah. And before we go forward, why is this so important? Again, 80% of professionals think that cultural fit is essential. And here's another fact. According to Gallup in 2018, they did a study that said that cultural misalignment can lead to a 48% decrease in work quality.
48%?
Yeah. So if you are a high achiever, a leader, someone who puts career as a priority in your life, if you are going into a job and you're like, hey, I'm so excited about this company, I'm so excited about this role, I'm ready to make an impact. And all of a sudden, you're like, I'm no longer aligned at this company. I feel like they're toxic. I don't like my boss. I don't like these employees, etc. Your productivity, all of your impact is going to decrease by half. That's wild. And just a personal story, this has happened for me too.
As you were saying it, I think it happened to me too.
Yeah. And I've been at companies where I've gone and I've built HR teams, I've grown the company, I've helped implement software systems, et cetera. And then that company has changed its culture, changed its leadership. And then I'm feeling so misaligned. I'm burning out. And my productivity, my goals, they're not meeting at the same level as it was before because of the fact that your emotions, your mindset, your alignment, it's just not there like it was before.
So if we really kind of wanted to say align to our current organization, what would somebody do to kind of do that?
Yeah. So the first step, you've already kind of assessed yourself, right? What is really important to me? And your values are going to change throughout your life, right? So what might be super important to you right now might not be what was important to you 5 years ago and might not be what's important to you 5 years from now. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you want to assess your current current company that you're working at value. Does it align? Understand what the company's core values are, what their mission is, what their culture is, right? Because you might just be going through a bad week, a bad day, a bad month. It could just be the project that you're working on is just not what you're best suited for. So having a conversation with yourself first and really doing that assessment is going to give you a clearer picture on what's going on with me, what's going on with the company, what's going on with my current situation, and does this really mean I need to make a change?
Wow. So it sounds like once we have everything kind of laid out there, it's going to be a lot easier to kind of evaluate. But then at that point, I would assume now we kind of need to have regular check-ins and we need to kind of make sure that we're frequently coming back to this to make sure that we're in alignment with what my department's doing, what the company's doing, as well as what I want.
Exactly. Wow. So this is a big thing. You're constantly evolving. You're constantly changing. You're growing. You're learning new things. Hopefully this is a constant thing that you're doing anyways, right? In your career and in your role is you're constantly growing. You're constantly learning things. And if that's the case, great. But I always recommend doing a regular check-in with yourself. Are my values still in alignment with where I am today? Are my values in alignment with my company and their values? And am I still growing and learning within the role that I'm in? If all of those three things are correct, then great. Move forward, right? Continue as is. But if you're starting to notice some friction, right? I'm not growing. I'm feeling a little bit of stagnation. I'm starting to notice some things that my company is doing that I don't really feel that aligned with, or I'm starting to feel like my company is valuing some things that I'm not valuing, or vice versa. I'm starting to notice that I value things outside of my work life that my company doesn't value, right? Then all of a sudden you're starting to notice some misalignment. How often should you do these regular checks? I recommend every quarter, right? At the very most. Because if you're doing this so often, you're going to start looking for things, right? But twice a year, once a year, at least do it on a regular basis. When you're doing your performance reviews, maybe do a little performance review with yourself, right? How did I grow this year? What are my values? What are my company's values? And am I in alignment, right? The other thing that I would also recommend, do you want to talk about this?
Well, I would think at this point it's kind of seeking feedback
Yeah.
around this process, like talking with other people, your colleagues, like, hey, what do you kind of see, and having water talks at the water cooler, right, to find out what is happening that you're seeing, to confirm that others are seeing it as well, and then talking with people outside of your organization, the people that are your friends, people that are mentors, and really kind of just letting them know what's happening internally, what you're feeling, and how, and really just kind of getting some feedback to see if it's something that is advisable on potentially making a change.
Absolutely. Feedback is a gift, right? We've all heard this. And especially if you can view feedback as a gift, instead of kind of getting your defenses up and all that other stuff, you can truly move forward in such a great and beautiful way. So what type of feedback are we looking at, right? It's feedback. If you're not sure about what your values are, seek feedback from people that you're really close to. Seek feedback from your people, department leaders, company leaders, etc., on where you believe the company is heading if you're not quite sure, right? And you can also seek feedback from people that you truly care about, mentors, friends that you trust. Again, I mentioned this in another episode. If you would not take that person's advice, do not seek their feedback or their criticism, but get feedback so that you can find out what their personal values are, if there's someone that you admire, or what you believe, or I'm sorry, what they believe are your personal values, just by observing and knowing you. So those are some ways that you can get started. Again, tomorrow I'm going to give you some other ways to get started as well.
Sounds awesome. I can't wait to hear.
Yeah.
So I really kind of want to ask a question around this next topic, because I think I've experienced this, and I'm certain our listeners have as well. But company versus department culture.
Yeah.
This seems to be something that we know of, but do we really focus on? Because I've been a part of teams within a department that were awesome, whereas the department itself might have had some, let's say, issues to deal with. But then again, the company overarching everything had its own type of situations that can happen. And do you mind explaining a little bit more here?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about what's the definition of company culture, etc., right? So the definition of company culture is the overall environment, values, and behaviors that define the organization. So this includes the company's mission, vision, ethics, and the general way that things are done. So there's this nuance between the company culture that it promotes and the actual company culture. Okay, so the company culture, again, is the environment, values, and behaviors that define the organization, including the mission, vision, ethics, and the general way things are done. So there's the culture that it can aspire to be, right? The mission, the values, the vision, etc. And then it's the actual company culture, the way that it acts, the behaviors, etc. So in an ideal company, those are the same, right? Ideally. But it really depends on how senior leadership portrays those values, if they uphold those values and really have accountability to ensure that other leaders match those values and uphold it within the other departments and within the teams and across the organization. And if they're authentic and transparent about where the gaps are and how they're trying to meet it. The problem is that if they are not in specific departments, that's where there's different department and team cultures within the organization. So department specific culture refers to the unique culture within the particular team or department, and this can vary widely within the same company. So an example could be a company that truly values diversity, equity, inclusion, values innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurial spirit, etc. All those really great, juicy things that job seekers today are really looking for. And then you have a department that might be led by a leader that was promoted or a favorite by a senior leader or something like that that doesn't have the leadership skills, or is potentially hiring based on favoritism, or is promoting or only giving the best projects to the favorite people on the team, right? That does not at all foster diversity, equity, inclusion. It's not fostering innovation, because we all know diversity fosters innovation and creativity. And so all of a sudden that team or that department's culture is going to be wildly different than the overarching company's culture.
Are you finding that when a department culture is different from the corporate culture, that it tends to lend itself to more unhappy employees?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so here's the reason why. When the department's culture is different from the company culture, it breeds a lot of strife. It breeds a lot of disconnection, less collaboration, less cohesion. And the reason why is because it starts at that recruiting and that hiring stage, right? So your company is promoting one thing, and then when the top talent or the person going through the hiring process is going through that hiring process, they're told one thing at the recruiting stage, they're told a different thing at the hiring manager stage. They're getting conflicting information when they're trying to network their way in or talking to potentially different people on the team, and they're getting a conflicting message, right? If they accept that offer, when they work in the department that maybe has a negative culture versus a company that is promoting a good culture, maybe that department is being shunned. That department is not being collaborated with. It's siloed because of the negative culture. If in an ideal world, the rest of the company is in a good culture, right? So now that culture is struggling. They're not being collaborated with. Their projects are not being worked on with other company or with other departments. And that new employee is going to have a completely different experience than what they were promised. Now that's going to be a bad apple, right? Or whatever for the experience. That employee, and I just posted a Forbes article on this in September, earlier in September, about how authenticity it actually is going to benefit the hiring process, because that employee can then either leave, which increases your recruitment costs, decreases your retention rate, and potentially go and talk about this terrible experience on social media and blow up your entire company's culture.
Well, I think we're seeing that with the invention of Glassdoor, and there's some other websites out there where employees are being given the forums to really kind of air some of that dirty laundry. And I think that's really kind of making some job seekers take pause, because obviously we all want a job, but when you see something that where somebody was treated a certain way, and you actually get that emotion of the situation they were in, it definitely makes us think twice.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the department culture truly reflects the leadership style of the department leader or the department manager, the nature of the work, or the specific goals and challenges of that department. And so this comes at the very top. And so I've seen over and over and over again, from working with people in the job search, from working with organizations, that a lot of times people or HR departments will set the culture, quote unquote, and then expect the employees to just live by it, or expect recruiting teams to hire those types of employees, but don't always hold the leadership accountable to live by it. But the fact of the matter is that you can't have a culture from the ground up or from the bottom up. You have to have the culture from the top down, because everyone looks towards the leaders to set the example. And so often, rather, companies give excuses or allow bad behavior to be swept under the rug by senior leaders. And unfortunately, that stuff doesn't get swept under the rug. It gets seen and observed and passed down to other employees throughout the departments. And those things have a huge ripple effect. And so my call to senior leaders or board members and senior owners of businesses, right, and the C-suites, are to truly hold leaders accountable. And if they are not holding your culture accountable, to truly look at the impact that this is having, especially in a job market like it is now, where if you truly can't not be transparent and authentic about what's going on in your company at this stage in the game. There was a recent article that was released that says that nearly 40% of hiring managers lie during the interview process, which is causing a huge amount of churn in the job market. It's bait and switching employees and job seekers, and it's creating a toxic culture for your organization, which is costing a lot of money, decrease in productivity, etc.
Wow, that last statistic was quite scary.
It is.
40%.
It is. It's tough. It's tough out there to be a job seeker, but this is a good way. By the way, another plug, next week, we are going to be talking about the two types of job searches, the traditional job search of applying online and a strategic and authentic job search. And this plays into a strategic and authentic job search if you are a job seeker, and how to really suss out what the true company culture is. So let's talk about how to research that.
Yeah. So tell me, when going to research a company, where do you start? What do we want to do when we're going to kind of sit down to actually have this playbook in front of us?
Yeah. And if you're a senior leader listening to this, according to Glassdoor, in 2019, 70% of job seekers use social media to research company culture. And that's from Glassdoor. Now, people are literally posting about companies, the toxic things that they're doing everywhere on social media. We see it all the time on LinkedIn, all the time, every single day. I see it all the time on TikTok. Videos are going viral. And so at this point, again, I posted on Forbes and on here, I'm calling out to companies to be authentic and transparent about their cultures in the hiring process. It will only help job seekers, and it will only help you as a company as well. But another actionable tip for job seekers who are looking about the company is to look on social media to see what other people are posting about the companies that you're going in to interview. That's the first step that I would do. The second step that I would do is to actually dedicate time to, again, not only explore companies on LinkedIn, social media posts, Glassdoor, but to also network and speak to employees that work at that company. We're going to be going over a little bit more about this next week in a strategic and authentic job search and how to do this. However, when you speak to people who are not trying to sell you on the job, such as recruiters or the hiring managers who might be lying to you, but you're speaking to the actual people who either work in the job that you're applying to, who will be your future team members, who work in other departments, right? Who can tell you a little bit about the department you're going into, or etc., right? People who used to be working there, who have left and gone on to another job. You're going to get a more authentic and more transparent answer into what's going on, not only at the company and its culture, but also in the department you're going into.
So it sounds like, and I just want to reiterate this to make sure I have it correct. It sounds like what you're saying, first and foremost, we need to utilize platforms like LinkedIn and Glassdoor to get the insights.
Do your
but
research, yeah.
We also need to set aside time to be able to have conversations with people within the department, not just those outreach individuals that are in the job search, such as recruiters, HR, and hiring managers. We need to get the skinny on actually what's happening inside those organizations.
Yep. In fact, networking is super, super important, having those conversations. In fact, according to LinkedIn, 85% of all jobs are filled due to networking.
85%?
85%. I know networking is a scary word. And people don't like to.
Yep. But aren't job boards a thing? Isn't that how people are supposed to get jobs?
I know. And we're going to be talking about this next week. But job boards, truly, if job boards are your only strategy in your job search, they only give you about a 1% to 2% chance of landing an interview. And again, we're dealing with some real crappy stuff, right? Recruiters who don't understand your value, job descriptions that are written for some unicorn professional that we've never heard of, and some like really crazy bullet point requirements. You're dealing with hiring managers that are lying to you now, we're finding, right? And so when you are networking, one of the benefits is that you get to capitalize on employee referrals. Employee referrals give you a 15 times more likely chance of landing an interview. You get to learn more about the company, the real truth of the company, and it's a more effective, strategic, authentic way.
Well, I'm sold. I think networking for the win, right? Like obviously here.
Yeah.
But I guess I have to understand a little bit more of like what could we kind of do to allow ourselves to have more networking opportunities, just at a high level. What would you recommend?
Great question. So one, attend industry events, right? There's so many virtual industry events out there. Going on LinkedIn and searching for them is a really, really great idea. We have a lot of clients that have joined Slack groups that are based on their industry, that have gone to webinars and met a lot of really great people at companies that they're excited about. You can also join social media groups, right? On Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, like all of these really great groups of professionals that are just like you, that are probably working at companies you're really excited about, or potentially also in a job search that may have worked at companies that they're not really excited about, that you might be interested in and you can learn a little bit more about, right? So one of the things that I want to talk about, Jack and I will talk about here, is that, listen, we know, and another study that came out in 2020 from Shuram, 50% of employees leave their jobs due to cultural misalignment. So if that's the case, you now know that this is a really important thing, that you don't want to end up in a cultural misfit in your next job. How do we have these conversations in the interview, in the networking calls? How do we make sure that we're doing this in a job search?
Well,
Right?
yeah. So I think really what we need to do, if we need that information, we got to have targeted questions.
Yeah.
We have to make sure that we're also observing goodness, what happened with my English today? We're observing the environment. We have to pay attention to the cues when we're sitting there in the office, in that waiting desk. How are we being greeted? How are other people being greeted when they're walking around the office? When you do go into that interview, are you getting a chance to kind of peek at other people doing their jobs? Are they collaborating? Are they helping, coaching, mentoring? Does everybody seem to be in a good mood? What is the vibe of that office, right? Make sure to check in with yourself and all of those other surrounding things so you can get a true pulse of what's happening.
Absolutely. And so when you're in the interview, here are some questions that you can ask too. If you're in a recruiter, hiring manager, peer, networking call, etc., here's a question that I really like to ask to anyone is, hey, can you tell me a little bit about the culture of the organization and what it means to you? Right? So it's not just, can you tell me a little bit about the culture, but what it means to you? And that will literally help you understand what it truly, how the culture embodies to that one person, and if it truly matters, right? And if you ask that to multiple people throughout the hiring process, you're going to see if there's consistency or if it's completely all over the board, right? I love what Jack mentioned. A lot of those were for in person. If you are on a Zoom call with one person, just keep in mind, how is that person treating you? How are you treated throughout the hiring process? Are you ghosted? Do you have good follow-up? Is that person rushing off the phone, etc., right? And I know that that's sometimes just a personal thing, depending on who that person is, but it also kind of relates back to how that company trains their hiring manager and their recruiters on how to treat people in an interview. And that's important too, right? Other questions that you can ask is, what is what is the company's mission and what does that mean to you? Tell me about the company values and which one stands out to you the most, or which one do you embody in your role? Those are some of the types of questions that you can ask in an interview or a networking call to help you suss out a little bit about the culture and how it plays out in each individual person and in the department. Other questions to kind of suss out about the department specifically is, tell me a little bit about the department leader's leadership style. Tell me about the department's leader and how they embody the company culture, right? Tell me about the organizational structure of the department and how the department's culture relates to the company's culture, right?
I think that all those tips were just spot on. And it seems as though really at this stage, we kind of understand how to do that reflection on our own values, how to be able to really do an analysis of that cultural fit. And I really thank you for all of this information. And I thank you for joining us today on today's episode of the Career Advancement Academy, where we delved into this critical aspect of aligning with the company culture for your career success. If you found these insights helpful, please share this episode with your friends, colleagues. Your feedback just means a ton to us, and it helps others discover the Career Advancement Academy. If you enjoyed the show, just take a moment, subscribe. Go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcasting platform.
Absolutely. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. We hope that it helps you figure out what your next step is when it comes to figuring out the next company culture that you align with. I'm Kara Dennison. This is Jack Dennison. Make sure to check out the YouTube video tomorrow and stay tuned for next week when we talk about the different types of job searches. Have a great rest of your week.